Hi, Maurice Kogan again, back with answer 9 to the 64 questions I cover in my questions and answers for exporters and export counselors. This video will cover the very key issue of export readiness and will take a little longer than the other videos. It's important as companies deemed not export ready may be ineligible for several federal export assistance programs. For example, for many years, EXIM and SBA required at least 1 year of export sales for their export working capital and export credit insurance programs. Now they're at least open to waivers on a case-by-case basis. UCX typically deflect NTE requests for meetings, suggesting they start with other organizations often less qualified to help. As I noted in previous videos, the NTEs that are, quote, not yet ready for our help, unquote, account for a whopping 75% of all U.S. manufacturers. That's a very large chunk of potential exporters to write off. They're caught in a catch-22. I need help because I'm new to export. We can't help you because you're new to export and not ready for our help. The irony here is that every existing exporter started as a non-exporter. Do they all have to figure it out for themselves? The fact is that many NTE manufacturers could export successfully if willing to try and given the help they need. They have, after all, survived in the very tough US market against the same competition they would face in foreign markets. That means they know how to run a successful business, just not yet in the export arena. With that as context, we'll get directly to the question, what will it take for an NTE to become export ready? Let's first define what the term export ready is generally understood to mean. An export ready business is one that has the capacity, resources, and management to deliver a marketable product on a global scale at a competitive price. Note that this definition says nothing about actual export sales. In that sense, an NTE with no prior export sales would qualify as export ready if it can demonstrate a capacity to export. This is a crucial point lost on federal export assistance agencies that equate export readiness and eligibility for assistance to at least 1 year of export sales. Given export capacity as the better gauge of a company's export readiness, what attributes must a company have to demonstrate it has capacity to export? Here are my 7. 1, its top management is willing to give exporting a good faith effort. 2, it has adequate finances for a startup export operation. 3, it has export knowledge or will train or hire new staff to acquire it. 4, its organization could absorb the additional workload from new exports. 5, it uses sound domestic business practices that also make sense for exporting. 6, it draws on available export assistance programs and resources as needed. And 7, it could fill most export orders from available inventory or other sources. Let's take a deeper look at each of these indicators of export readiness. 1, your top management is willing to give exporting a good faith effort. Exporting should not be pursued for the quote wrong, unquote, wrong reasons. For example, to make a quick buck, only to shut it off abruptly if not enough happens soon enough. Management should see the right reasons for exporting as a contribution to specific company goals and be willing to wait the longer time it might take to bear fruit. 2, your company has adequate finances for a startup export operation. Beyond the existing finances for your domestic business, you'll incur some incremental costs for exporting, such as for website globalization, market promotion, partner searches, and possible foreign business trips and trade shows. A STEP grant can reimburse many of these costs. As export orders come in, you may need working capital to produce the additional supply beyond your current inventory. SBA and EXIM offer working capital loan guarantees to cover these expenses. 3, your company has export knowledge or will train or hire new staff to acquire it. As an established domestic business, you already have the basic knowledge also needed for export, such as how to plan, budget, finance, market, manage a sales network, fill orders, control inventory, service customers, comply with U.S. regulations, and package and ship goods. As a new exporter, you'll also need to learn how to sell to foreign countries with often different languages, cultures, business practices, and regulations. You'll also need to master some of the procedural differences, such as different documentation and price quoting and payment methods. You can acquire these new skills immediately by hiring an export specialist. This can be an entry-level NASBITE certified global business professional, CGBP, rather than a higher cost executive with years of experience. Alternatively, you can self-train yourself or your staff on the basics of exporting. The internet has extensive how-to export guides and webinars. Look also for export workshops that typically cover all need-to-know topics. 4, your organization could absorb the additional workload from new exports. New exports will create added and more specialized processing work for the company. Depending on volume, don't just dump it on existing staff that might create backlogs in filling orders. Foreign customers have little tolerance for delays that could impact their supply chain and add to their costs. If you're now understaffed for export, determine where the gap is. You may need to reorganize or add staff to fill it. 5, your company uses sound domestic business practices that also make sense for exporting. Sound methodology is as critical in exporting as in domestic selling. If you've been successful at home, you already do many things right. Exporting requires the same sound methodology, adapted as needed for countries with different cultures, technical standards, regulatory regimes. 6, your company draws on government and other export assistance resources as needed. Many SME exporters have learned that doing it alone by trial and error can be disastrous. They often attribute their successes to use of Commerce, SBA, and XIM services, such as counseling sessions, STEP grants, working capital loans, export credit insurance, and help to globalize their website, identify and enter target markets, find overseas partners, promote the products, and comply with regulations. Successful exporters also draw on more transactional help from banks, freight forwarders, and attorneys. You should line up these support services in advance to call on when needed. 7, your company can fill most new export orders from present inventory or other sources. Exporters should be able to be able to respond promptly to any new foreign orders. Foreign buyers typically can buy from other sources, and if you can't fill the order when they want it, they usually find somebody else who can. Don't start or impair a relationship with delays and apologies. You should have enough inventory on hand or the ability to increase production quickly to fill all orders. Now, does all this mean that until you have met these conditions 100%, that you're not capable of exporting or should not be given any government export help? No, you are ready enough for exporting and should not be denied help as long as you are committed to taking these export capacity building steps and are making tangible progress. That's it for export readiness. The next video will address the question, how can I tell if my product has export potential? Until then, thanks for listening.